Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. Join us as we explore ruminant nutrition and the impact of mycotoxins. Here, we challenge your curiosity and explore new industry insights and research to optimize your herd's health and performance. All right. Hey, welcome everybody back to Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. I'm your host, Scott Zehr. And today we are going to be talking with our Vice President of Nutrition, Dr. Larry Roth. And Larry, but we're actually going to be focusing on something other than ruminants today, correct?
Correct.
All right. So about a month ago, if you've been following along on our podcast, we talked to Cody Klein, who's our international account manager. And he shared with us that, internationally, especially on our Asian markets, our predominant market over there is in swine. And so recently here in June, Dr. John Zehr, that had been with Agrarian for a number of years, was able to publish the results of a swine trial that was conducted. And I've invited Dr. Roth to Ruminate This platform today to share with us the findings of that study. So with that, Larry, I know for our podcast audience, you don't get to see the slideshow that Larry's going to show. Click the YouTube link, go over to YouTube, and you can see him go through that presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Larry for some information on our swine data.
Hey, thanks, Scott. I look forward to talking today about this weanling pig study. It was actually done in Thailand, and it was published this year in a scientific journal called Animals. And on the screen, the listeners can see the reference to it, or if they contact us, we would be glad to send them the peer-reviewed article. So, Scott, this is a completely randomized design. It used 120 newly weaned pigs that were 3 weeks of age. They were out of Duroc boars, and the sows were landrace large white crosses. 6 replicates, 5 pigs per pen. Pens were 1.5 meter by 1.5 meter, nippled waters, and concrete feed bunk. This study went on for 6 weeks. So it'll be typical nursery type growth study. We had 4 treatments, and there's some interesting things here. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the treatments, Scott. We had a control. It was the standard management practices plus BioFix plus. So there was a mycotoxin protection product even in the control. Now, what's interesting, Scott, in this study, they did not pick up significant mycotoxin levels in the feed. So really, we're looking at what happens when we do not have mycotoxin challenges. So let's keep that in mind as we go through the results here. So the control, standard practices plus BioFix plus at their recommended feeding rate. Then we had an antibiotic treatment, which was the control, which again included BioFix plus CTC, colistin, and thiamulin. Now, in the United States, we do not feed colistin or thiamulin to pigs, but in Thailand they did. So we'll make a few references to that as we go on in the interpretation results. And then there was an enzyme treatment, which was the control, which again contained BioFix plus some amylase, beta-glucanase, protease, and xylanase. And in the refereed article, the levels of those 4 enzymes are listed. And then we came to the treatment that we are perhaps the most interested in, and that's DTX. And it was DTX plus the control. So let's keep this in mind, Scott, that the DTX treatment is actually DTX on top of BioFix plus. Okay, so it would have been perhaps the best if it had been a straight head-to-head comparison, but now we're looking at benefits that we get on top of BioFix plus, and we'll be able to make some references from all of that. Pigs were in an environment where they tried to keep the temperature in the 85 to 90 range, but being Thailand, it was quite often warmer than that, 60 to 70% humidity. So we probably would have had a little bit of heat stress going on. They had side fans, so it wasn't a tunnel ventilated barn. They monitored ammonia and increased the ventilation anytime ammonia exceeded 5 parts per million. So trying to do that from a respiratory health standpoint. And again, as I said before, nipple drinkers in the concrete feeder box. Scott, let's get into some results here. This is in kilograms, so we can make some transfers over to pounds. But we see at week 0, there was no differences between the treatments for starting weight. Now, on the far right-hand column, we have p-values, and that is a direct statistical contrast between the DTX treatment and the control treatment. Within each line, we have superscript, which are letters, and they indicate the differences within the treatment. So the p-value is the direct contrast between DTX and control, and then we're also evaluating differences between the treatments. Well, by week 6, the greatest individual body weight growth was with the DTX fed pigs. And again, remember, this was without significant mycotoxin levels. So at this point, we can stop for a second and say, is DTX doing something in addition to protecting the animal against mycotoxins? It would appear so. And remember, this is on top of what BioFix Plus is doing. Well, interestingly, Scott, if you look across the line, the lowest body weight, individual body weight, was with the BioFix Plus treatment. Okay. So we can conclude that maybe BioFix Plus isn't doing anything when we don't have mycotoxin issues. We go on to average daily gain, and as we might suspect, if we look at for the entire study, the greatest average daily gain came from the DTX treatment, and the lowest weight gain came from the BioFix Plus alone treatment. So we think about antibiotics. What do antibiotics do? Well, they control pathogens. Yeah, they do that, but they also can have a restrictive ability on beneficial organisms. Beneficial organisms help to control pathogens, plus they can help enhance immune function and increase nutrient absorption. Well, if we're feeding antibiotics, we might be reducing some of those beneficial bacteria and causing a shift toward antibiotic resistant organisms if fed for a long period of time, like in this study, which was conducted for 6 weeks. Enzymes gave some in-between growth between the controls, the antibiotic, and the DTX group. Now let's go down here and look at feed efficiency. Week 2, week 6, we didn't pick up differences between the treatments, but if we look at the entire 6-week study, we see that the best feed efficiency was for the DTX group, 1.92 pounds of feed to put on a pound of gain.
That's huge.
So that was statistically different from the other treatments. And look at this, Scott, a p-value of 0.0002 for DTX compared to the BioFix alone. Wow, Scott. We're doing something here in the absence of mycotoxins that is having a positive impact on weanling pig body weight gain and feed efficiency. Now, at week 2 and at week 4, they euthanized 1 pig per pen to look at VFAs in the large intestine, and also throughout the study, they were looking at fecal E. coli. We see that here on this screen, and I term this as looking at intestinal health. Well, we had the highest level of VFAs at week 2 and week 4 in the DTX treatment. So help me out, Scott. What's going on here? If we have more VFAs being produced in the hind gut, that's telling me we have the right balance of bacteria. If we had more pathogens in the hind gut, we're not going to be getting the VFAs. And in fact, VFA production would be reduced, and that's what we see is happening here. Here's how I look at it. If we don't absorb nutrients in the small intestine, those nutrients flow on down to the hind gut, just like something would float down a river.
Right.
So if we're getting higher VFAs, that tells us we have a beneficial balance. If we had more nutrients ending up in the hind gut, we'd have more of the pathogens, especially on the antibiotic treatment, because we're creating antibiotic resistant pathogens over 6 weeks. So I think that we can make some conclusions here that we're starting to improve digestibility and the absorption of nutrients in the small intestine. Let's think about that. We'll come back to it in just a moment with looking at some of those results. So here we're looking at fecal E. coli. No difference at the start of the study. And that's not surprising because we just started the study. But when we come to week 2, week 4, and week 6, we see that the lowest E. coli levels were for the DTX and for the enzyme treatment. Well, we might think that because the antibiotics are supposed to control pathogens. It seems that that's going on. But interestingly, they didn't look at salmonella. And then look at these p-values in the far right-hand column. Wow, significantly lower E. coli levels for DTX versus the BioFix Plus by itself. Significant at the 0.0001 level. So why might this be? Well, again, I think it's because we're doing something to enhance the immune system.
I mean,
With
Larry, at the
the
end of the day, we're a probiotic, right? So going to be some benefit there. And is this kind of demonstrating that, if you would, quote unquote, probiotic effect of DTX?
Yep, I think so. Exactly. And then let's go down here and let's look at ileal digestibility. So again, they sacrificed 1 pig per pen week 2, week 4. And with that, they were able to look at ileal digestibility. You know what the pig is consuming, use chromic oxide as a digestive marker, and then get some samples from the ileum at sacrifice time. Look at this. Numerically, we had the highest gross energy and protein and essential amino acid values for the DTX. Look at the far right-hand column for p-values comparing DTX to the control. Wow, look at that. We're significantly improving gross energy, crude protein, and essential amino acid digestibility. That's the probiotic effect. It's something, Scott, we probably don't spend enough time talking about. And again, this benefit was obtained in the absence of mycotoxins. My question is, if mycotoxins have been present, how much better might this have been?
Right.
Then we come to week 4, and we didn't pick up differences between the treatments for gross energy digestibility, but we sure picked up differences for crude protein and total essential amino acid digestibility. So feed as good a feed as you can, Scott, and then use the DTX to help improve the utilization of that diet.
Absolutely.
Here's an interesting chart. There's a whole bunch of numbers here. And what I did was I just did a snapshot from the PDF of the study, from the article, and pasted it into my PowerPoint. And kind of walk through it here. Week 2, when pigs were sacrificed, they looked at intestinal morphology at the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, jejunum, the middle part, and ileum at the end. And probably the biggest differences that we came up with was Villus height, that's the VH. CD is circumference, and then VCR is the total volume of the villi. So what we picked up with was Villus height at the duodenum was a trend for DTX to outperform the control or biofix by its own. When we come down to the ileum, Villus height was greater for the DTX as compared to the control. And then at week 4, so now we have more time for the DTX to be providing its benefits. Again, Villus height is greater at the duodenum, it's greater at the jejunum, and greater at the ileum. And then we see some trends present for total volume of the villi to be greater when DTX is being fed versus the control. So we look at all of this, Scott, and I think we can say feeding DTX has a probiotic effect for improving intestinal morphology and increasing the utilization of the diet, ending up in pigs that grow faster and are more feed efficient. And again, Scott, I know I keep repeating myself. Remember, this was in the absence of mycotoxins.
Yeah.
So this is saying that we have a benefit with DTX supplementation in addition to mycotoxin protection.
We've theorized, I'm going to say I came on board in 2020, and, we've theorized that DTX is maybe a quote unquote 2-for-1 type of product. And Larry, I kind of feel like this information is confirming that theory that we've had. Your thoughts there?
Right. Yeah. It's saying that we do a little bit more than just mycotoxin protection. And we have theorized that our mycotoxin protection comes from defending the epithelial cells that line the small intestine. I think we can say that we're doing things to help digestive lining health, even in the absence of the mycotoxins.
So a question I have for you, Larry, and obviously these are swine, monogastrics, but once you get past the stomach in a cow, we're pretty much all the same: swine, poultry, cattle, humans. We talk about leaky gut in cattle, which is degradation of that castle wall, as you like to say. Is this evidence that we're helping repair that?
Scott, your question was, do we help repair it?
Or prevent it, I should say.
I'm going to say that we've got some evidence here that we're helping to prevent leaky gut. And I'm saying that because we had improved weight gain, improved feed efficiency, improved diet utilization, lower E. coli levels. My only hesitation in saying that we enhanced or reduced leaky gut is I don't have the immune markers that are typically associated with determining the presence or absence of leaky gut.
And that's a great explanation. And I appreciate you taking that question, because that was one that I just came up with. So I kind of put you on the spot. But I think you're right in the sense that there's evidence that we're doing something in that small intestine. And, as you've said before, the perfect study has never been done. So maybe the next one we can look at the immune markers as well.
Right. Yeah. I would say that in response to your question, there's evidence that we're improving digestive tract health and indirect evidence that we're reducing leaky gut.
Yep.
At the end of the day, Scott, if we want to make money in the pork business, we have to have pigs that gain faster, stay alive, and are more feed efficient. And that happened here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting stuff. I think it's very complementary to the research we did on the cattle side with the dairy cows, where we looked at, production and reproduction metrics. And Larry, why did we see a milk response? Why did we see a reproductive response? Well, if a cow is dealing with less inflammation, she's able to utilize nutrients better. She's better able to partition those nutrients to making milk or getting pregnant and staying pregnant. This kind of, I feel like, demonstrates how that happened and how we saw those results in those dairy cows.
Yep. The difference there being we had mycotoxins present.
Yeah,
And
very
so
good point.
here we start to see some evidence that we're probably improving intestinal development and morphology in the presence of mycotoxins. Again, this is in the absence. The dairy study was in the presence, but we're starting to understand that we have an effect on intestinal health and morphology.
That's awesome.
That transfers over to production benefits.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Roth, I definitely appreciate you taking time out of the day today. You have challenged me to think about what I say on this podcast in the beginning of every episode where, we're here to discuss ruminant nutrition and the impacts of mycotoxins. And, with my conversation with you today, I think maybe we need to rethink that statement because I think this is some exciting research and I'm happy to be part of this organization that's not afraid to go out there and get the kind of research that's needed in this space in particular. And I tip my hat to our team at Agrarian for making that happen. So with that, Dr. Roth, any final words you want to add in?
I think the significance of this study is that in the absence of mycotoxins, the DTX had a probiotic effect to improve intestinal morphology and health, resulting in improved production benefits with weanling pigs, greater growth, improved feed efficiency. And once we get past the abomasum in ruminants, small intestine, large intestine structure and function is quite similar between ruminants and non-ruminants.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you again, Dr. Roth, for taking time out of your day today to chat with us here on Ruminate This. Again, if you would like any of the information referenced in today's call, namely the published paper, email us podcast@agrsol.com, and we will make sure we get that over to you ASAP. So thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great week, and we'll be talking again soon. If you found value in today's podcast, please hit subscribe and share. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.